very challenging. And part of the reason for that is that it is meant to be a test of your situational judgment. And so what that means is you really have to be prepared to answer situational judgment questions. In other words, what would you do in this particular challenging situation? So this is the next video in our series of Dissecting CASPer test questions. And in this video, I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into how to answer a situational judgment question. Now, this is the question where they present you with a challenging situation and they say, what would you do? So before we get started with a framework, I just want to remind you that you handle these kind of situations all the time in real life. So I'll give you an example. Let's say your friend Phoebe calls you up and says, oh my gosh, I'm so upset, I don't know what to do. I've been working at the coffee shop and my boss just took me aside. He said that I have had several complaints from people at work that I'm not doing my job. And I just know that Monica is the one that has been complaining about me. And I really feel like I'm just gonna pick up the phone and give her a piece of my mind. What do you think I should do? So you are the friend in that scenario that I just presented. And if you think back, what would be something weak? A weak example would be, oh my gosh, Phoebe, you're right, that's so unfair. You need to call Monica up right now and give her a piece of your mind. In real life, you wouldn't do that, right? In real life, how would you respond to a scenario like this? Well, in real life, you would respond with empathy. Oh my gosh, Phoebe, that sounds so upsetting. I'm so sorry that you're having to go through this. You'd also ask for more information, wouldn't you? Wow, I wonder if it really was Monica that made that phone call. Do you think there's a chance it might have been somebody else? You would probably also do a little creative problem solving with your friend, Phoebe. You wouldn't just tell her what to do. You'd say, well, do you think there's any other options? Is there something else that might have happened? And do you think there's any other ways that you might want to approach this? Maybe you should call Monica up and ask her a few questions before you start giving her a piece of your mind. So in real life, you wouldn't just jump to a solution. You would go through these different steps. And I want to remind you about that on the CASPer exam, when you're answering situational judgment questions, that's the same way that you want to approach that situation. So in this video, I want to present you with a little bit of a formalized framework just to have you think about a structure when you're approaching a challenging situation. So I recommend a framework called I3P. And the reason I recommend frameworks is just because when you're on the CASPer exam, you really don't have much time. You might have 30 seconds to think about a question, and then you have to start furiously typing because you've got 3 questions and you've got about 90 seconds per each question. So it doesn't give you a lot of time to work through the nuances. So I find that it's helpful to have a framework that's ready to go. So the I3P framework stands for issues, impact, information, and potential approaches. Now, the 3 I's can go in any order that you like. I like, however, to end with the P of potential approaches or solutions. And this was a framework that I came up with when I was thinking about how best to quickly be able to respond to these challenging scenarios. So I3P, let me go into that just a little bit deeper on what I mean by each of those. So the first I in this is issues. And one of the things that I recommend when you're typing out your response is to actually verbalize the issues at play here. That can help you clarify your thought processes and also demonstrate that you understand. And examples of issues might be issues of autonomy, confidentiality, personal or professional boundaries, work-life balance, feedback. So there are a lot of potential issues that might come up in these scenarios. So I find it helpful to actually write them down. And then the next one that I talk about is impact. I think it's very helpful to actually describe who or what will be impacted by this scenario and by your potential approach to this scenario. And the reason you want to actually talk about who or what will be impacted is because it demonstrates your respect and consideration for all the parties involved. So the impact might be on the individual, it might be on their family members, it might be on their supervisor, it might be on their coworkers. On a larger scale, it might be on the organization, it might be on society at large, it might be financial implications to taxpayers. So there are a lot of potential people, individuals, organizations, groups that might be impacted by this challenging scenario. So I think it's helpful to actually write that down to demonstrate that you're considering the viewpoints and the considerations for all parties that are involved. Now the next I is information, and it's really important to describe the kind of information that you're going to be seeking, just briefly. But I have to say that these scenarios tend to be very nuanced. I mean, the test creators clearly indicate that there's no right or wrong answer. And one of the things that they're doing is they're giving you a 2-minute scenario. But in 2 minutes, that's rarely enough to get all of the information you need. So it's really important to remember that A, you don't ever want to jump to conclusions. And B, it's almost always going to be helpful to obtain more information, and you can write that down. What kind of information are you going to be seeking? How are you going to seek that further information? But really, this is a key principle in life with any challenging scenario, is that you never want to jump to conclusions, and you're always going to be trying to understand the situation as fully and as comprehensively as possible, and that means seeking out more information. And then the final part of this is P, and that stands for potential approaches or solutions. Now, this is a test, this is an exam, but in real life, it rarely, I mean, there's hardly any situation that comes down to a binary decision. It's hardly ever A or B. It's almost always a nuanced approach, and there's a lot of variables involved, and your potential approach is going to depend on the different variables. So that's why when you're describing potential approaches, notice I do not use the singular here. It's really important to try to provide more than one potential approach. Again, the test creators have indicated there is no perfect answer here. So you're almost always going to end up with more than one potential approach. And this is where you use your if-then statements. So if I found out that Monica did call my boss, then I would recommend, if X, then Y. On the other hand, if I found out that Monica did not complain to our supervisor, then I would recommend, F. So it's really important to try to use the time that you have to demonstrate several different potential approaches. And again, I want to emphasize that it's I3P, there's 3 I's. They don't have to be in any particular order. And I'm going to give you a few examples of how you can incorporate these into a sample scenario. So you're presented with a scenario. You are friends with both Daphne and Natalie. And Daphne and Natalie have decided to take a trip together, and it is 3 months away. Daphne is the one that's making the travel arrangements, and they have together decided to rent a house. Now, Daphne confirmed with her friend that she was able to go on the trip, and once she got confirmation, she went ahead and made a deposit on the rental house. And she emailed Natalie a week later to ask for her share of the deposit. Natalie emailed back and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm not going to be able to take the trip anymore. And since it's 3 months away, I know you'll be able to find somebody else to take my place, so I'm not going to be contributing to the deposit." Well, now Daphne's upset and she calls you. She's upset because she clearly asked for a commitment from Natalie before she made the deposit on the rental house. She turns to you and asks, "What should I do?" Well, if you were typing out a response on the CASPer exam, this is an example of a response. I believe that Natalie should honor her commitment and pay her share of the rental deposit. She was clearly asked to make a commitment before her friend put down the deposit, and she said yes. And because of this, the ethical thing to do would be to go ahead and pay her share of the deposit. The fact that the trip is 3 months away does not negate the fact that she made a commitment. So, although on the face of it, this sounds like a decent answer, I mean, one good thing is that it is highlighting your sense of ethics. You know, she made a commitment, the ethical thing to do. So, in that respect, that's a good thing. But overall, this is a weak response. So, why is this a weak response? Well, first of all, it lacks empathy. There's no indication that the test taker has made the effort to think about this from Natalie's point of view. It also is a missed opportunity to highlight the applicant's creative problem-solving skills. There's only one solution presented. She needs to pay the deposit. But there's no other potential approaches or solutions suggested. And so again, it just doesn't highlight the creative problem-solving skills. And then another reason why this is a weak response is it doesn't highlight the applicant's sense of collaboration. There's really no effort made here to indicate that people are working together to come up with a solution. It's just, this is what she needs to do. So overall, lacking in empathy, lacking in creative problem-solving skills, and lacking in a sense of collaboration. And all three of those are things that the CASPer is clearly indicating that they're testing for. So overall, this is what I consider a weak response. In this example, you're going to see how I'm going to highlight first the issues, then the impact, then I'm going to ask for more information, and then I'm going to present some potential approaches. So, this is a challenging situation because it brings up issues of reliability, fairness, honoring one's commitments, and it has the potential to impact both of their finances as well as their friendship. I would start by recommending that she ask Natalie for more information, especially about why she's no longer able to go on the trip. Perhaps Natalie is having financial problems and can no longer afford it. If she found out that Natalie was having financial problems, then maybe they could come up with some other way for Natalie to honor her commitment, such as by finding a replacement. On the other hand, if Natalie just decided that she didn't want to go, then it is important that Daphne ask for reimbursement, perhaps either via straight payment or perhaps via setting up a payment plan. I would start by asking for more information, especially her reasons for backing out. Issues of financial responsibility and commitments can be challenging, and it can affect both of their finances as well as their friendship. If it turns out that Natalie was having financial problems, then I would ask her to contribute in another way. If, on the other hand, she had just changed her mind, I would respectfully explain her commitment and ask for reimbursement either financially or by finding the replacement. Here's a slightly different approach to this question. So to start with, I'm going to highlight information. I would not jump to conclusions because there are several potential reasons why Natalie may have backed out, and this situation has the potential to impact their long-term friendship as well as their finances. And it brings up issues of honoring your commitments and responsibilities to your friends. If I found out that Natalie was having financial issues, I would work with her to try to see if there were other ways that she could perhaps earn the money, maybe by taking extra shifts. If it was just a matter of her changing her mind, then I would respectfully explain that she had made a commitment and ask her for either reimbursement or by finding a replacement travel partner. In this example, I'm going to start with the issues first. So, what do we owe a friend to whom we made a commitment? Issues of personal commitments, personal responsibilities, values, these are all important, and they have the potential to impact friendships, finances, and upholding your values. In this situation, I would first find out more information about why Natalie was backing out. If it turned out that she was having financial problems, I would try to problem solve with her to see if there were other ways that she could earn money. If, on the other hand, she had just changed her mind, I would sit down with her and respectfully ask her to uphold her commitment and explain that the responsible thing to do would be to reimburse Daphne for her portion of the rental deposit, or find a replacement, or contribute in some other way. So those are 4 different examples of how you could respond to this scenario. I want to highlight that in real life, if Mary said something about Matthew, oh my gosh, he's a horrible worker, you would not necessarily believe that straight up. You tend to give people the benefit of the doubt in the real world, and it's important to give people the benefit of the doubt in the setting of a CASPer exam as well. So that's one thing that I think was really important here, that we don't know why Natalie was backing out of her commitment. It was important to give her the benefit of the doubt and to try to find out more information. So in here you can see how even just within the span of a few sentences, you can highlight the issues and the impact. Always important to verbalize that you're asking for more information and to present more than one potential scenario. If you're able to, it's also really important to verbalize those words that indicate empathy and respect. So there were several places where I tried to use the word respectfully. I would respectfully sit down with Natalie and explain that she had made a commitment. So it's important because you might be thinking it, but it's important to either verbalize it or to write it down. So those are some examples there, and if you'd like more about the CASPer exam, we have our upcoming book to help you prepare for the CASPer exam, and we have a series of blog posts that if you look in the video description, you'll see links to our 6-part blog post about preparing for the CASPer exam. If you're taking the CASPer exam this year, I wish you all the best.